Friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Em, and today we are going to be doing my February wrap-up. So February was overall, I think, a really good reading month. If my memory serves me correctly, even though it's a short month, I don't know. The books I finished at the beginning of the month, it just feels like it was another lifetime. I felt like that at the end of January too. And I thought maybe it was just because January is a longer month, but no, I still feel like that at the end of February. So I will do my best to remember about some of these books. I did do a fair amount of DNFing for February. Do we care about DNFs? Do you want to hear about DNFs? I'll share them today. And then if you're not interested in hearing about the books I DNF, let me know down below. If you do like hearing about what I DNF, let me know down below. And yeah, so I DNF'd Rosemary and Rue by Seanan McGuire. This is part of a very lengthy October Day series, which is like urban fantasy procedural series, I guess, with an amateur detective who is part fae. And as much as I love Seanan McGuire and I love the Wayward Children series and I love Middle Game and I love pretty much everything she's written, this just was not for me. It was not my cup of tea. I just didn't enjoy it, so I DNF'd it rather than give it a bad rating because I don't want a low rating on a Seanan McGuire book on my permanent record. So I DNF'd that. I also DNF'd How to Date a Superhero, not because it was bad, not because it was boring. It just wasn't the right book at the right time. I'm hoping that I will circle back around to it at some point because I was enjoying it. I just think it's right book, wrong time syndrome. Same with Gentleman in Moscow. I started this during my random number generator chooses my TBR video and liked it fine, but just not, this is not a season of my life where I have the patience for a slower historical fiction that has zero magic in it. Like speculative historical fiction, historical fantasy, I'm all there, but just regular historical fiction. This is not what I'm feeling right now. So I set it aside. Hopefully I'll pick it up later. And then I also just the last day of the month DNF, I can't remember the title of this book by Alison Saft. Far Wilder Magic, there we go. Because it was just too slow paced for what I'm in the mood for, even though I really liked the writing. It was like a 38% and we hadn't even gotten to what the synopsis says is the main plot. And I read some reviews on Storygraph and those reviews said that main plot doesn't even happen until 90% of the way through the book. So yeah, so I'm just letting that one go. I do want to try Saft's newest release because I did really like the writing. The pacing in this one wasn't a good fit for me. So those are the DNFs. Now we can get into what I actually finished. I'm going to go in order of least enjoyed to most enjoyed because I feel like ending this video on a high note. And if I went in chronological order of what I read this month, then the last book I would talk about is a book that I'm just like, it's fine about. And that's not the energy I'm looking for. So we're gonna go in order of least enjoyed to most enjoyed. Do I need to talk about anything else? I read 17 books. Most of them were library books. There's a fair amount of my own TBR in here, I guess. But I feel like I read a lot of library books. Anyways, let's just go into it. So starting with the books that didn't really work for me. Some of these I didn't like and some of them just were kind of they just didn't live up to the expectations I had for them. The first one is Navigational Entanglements. This is Aliette de Bodard's newest release that comes out in July. It's a novella, it's a space opera, and I want to love this author so much. I want to sing her praises from the rooftops. I want to be her bestie, and I just have not found the book yet where I can be that person. And I cannot figure out why they don't work for me. What else I would need to love these books. I did have some technical difficulties reading this one. I got this as an E arc from Tor, which is so kind of them to send my way, but the format in the PDF was off, and the characters' names were a mix of English lettering and Chinese characters, which made it so hard to know what anybody's name is. And there are a lot of characters in this book. So I do think I'm gonna try this again on audio once it is out in July, like July 30th, and see if it works better when I know what everybody's name is. Because I definitely think that was, you know, a problem. But nothing I can do about that now. So I was kind of bummed about that one. This other one wasn't a disappointment, but I wasn't singing it from the rooftops, but I also read Pomegranates by Priya Sharma, which is another novella. This one is climate catastrophe set. The world has descended into eternal winter, and this novella is centered in the Greek gods. So the reason that winter has descended, aside from climate change, is that Hades has gone missing, and so Persephone has had to step in as queen of the underworld, and because she has had to step in as queen of the underworld, the balance of the seasons has disappeared, and Demeter, in her grief for losing her daughter, has checked herself into a mental institution, though the doctors and the nurses there don't believe that she is a Greek goddess. They think she is just a confused woman who has lost her daughter. And I thought the project was really interesting. I really liked the idea. I really liked how the author used Greek gods in this setting, but I don't think it's something I'm going to be thinking about in another few months. I think I'm probably going to forget about it, but I did really like the idea of the project. Another one that was just kind of a disappointment, didn't actively hurt my feelings, is Golden Rage. This is a graphic novel that is the Golden Girls meets Battle Royale setup, where once people enter menopause, society shifts them off to this island where they basically battle to the death, and the main character in this, or the inciting incident for the story, is that a woman in her 30s is dropped off on the island, obviously because she's entered early onset menopause, or she's developed early onset menopause. Anyways, and I really wanted to like this. I thought the setup was so cool, but this really leaned on those Golden Girls archetypes a little too heavily for me. Like, there's very clearly a Dorothy, a Rose, a Sophia, and a Blanche, and they don't really stray from those archetypes, and I wanted a little bit more originality, because I thought the idea was so cool. But then it was just so obvious who was who. I will, however, be reading volume 2 when it comes out, because depending on how, this one definitely ends on a cliffhanger and you don't get any answers for the setup of this world. So I want to read volume 2 and see if we get some answers, and how volume 2 goes could change my opinion of volume 1. Okay, let's talk about the one that did hurt my feelings, where I was mad. I read Her Night with the Duke by Diana Quincy. I just liked this so much. Here's the thing. I love the heroine. The heroine was so cool. So this is a historical romance, and our heroine, I've forgotten her name because I read this at the beginning of the month, but she is half Arab, and she is widowed, and she has been traveling around the world meeting her mother's people and writing a travelogue of Arabia, but because she's a woman, she has been writing under a pseudonym. And so she comes back to England because her stepdaughter, who isn't that much younger than she is about to become engaged, and so she's traveling to this house party so she can meet the intended and be there to support her stepdaughter. But she stops at this inn and ends up having a one-night stand with this dude bro, only to show up at her deceased husband's estate the next day and discover that dude bro is her stepdaughter's almost fiance. And that's our setup. And like I said, I loved our main character. I thought she was so smart. She was so adventurous. She was strong. She was really interesting. And Dude Bro was so boring in comparison. So boring. And he just was so frustrating. And I didn't feel like I didn't feel like he deserved her. And so if I'm not a fan of the romance, man, the romance novel is really not romancing. So that pretty much killed it for me. There also did like my least favorite thing that romance novels do, where this is like kind of a spoiler, also kind of not if you know how historical romance goes, but at the beginning of the book when they're having the one night stand, she's like, hey, by the way, I'm barren, so we don't have to worry about me getting pregnant, and a magic penis fixes everything by the epilogue. So I hate that so much. I just think authors need to deal with writing about infertility, or just don't even introduce it as an option, or talk about historical birth control. That would be cool too. I love it when a historical romance, like when the hero takes care to not get the woman pregnant. That's awesome. I love that. More of that, please. I don't know. Okay, so did not like moving on. I think I've ranted enough. And then the last one that was a disappointment was The Noble Hustle by Colson Whitehead. I just think he was trying to be too clever in this one. It's nonfiction about the time that this magazine gave Colson Whitehead $10,000 to play in the World Series of Poker, and it's about him like learning how to elevate his poker game, because he's really only played in like, you know, Sunday afternoons with his friends and in college, and so very casual, and so he has to step up his game, and it, you know, goes to a personal trainer to learn how to sit for 12 hours a day without wrecking his body. And it could have been so good, but he had this bit and the bit got old pretty quick, which made me sad. Also, his writing when he is doing nonfiction is totally different than his writing when he is doing fiction, which makes sense, but I wanted to love this, and I think I ended up just giving it a 3 because it just didn't do. I wasn't excited. I wasn't excited to read it. This is why I wanted to get the bummers over with first. So now we can move on to the next stack, and this stack is books that I liked a lot but aren't the new loves of my life. So let's start with a romance that did not do me dirty. I read Headliners by Lucy Parker. This book is so small. It's mass market paperbacks. This is a contemporary romance. It's the last book in the London Celebrity series, which centers around the West End in London. And this one is about rival talk show hosts. And so good. I mean, nobody writes a rom-com like Lucy Parker does. I love this so much. Also, if you want a book where the two people do not want kids and it is not an issue and it's super casual, like, this is the book for you. And I really liked it. It is definitely not enemies to lovers, but rivals to lovers, competitive, what's the word I want? Career rivals to friends to lovers, something like that. Anyways, and that's pretty much all of Lucy Parker's books have that dynamic, but she's so good at it that I don't mind that it's the same dynamic every time. But this is about Nick and, oh, what's her name? Only remember the nickname he gives her. What's her name? Oh, Sabrina. So this is about Nick and Sabrina, who have been rival co-anchors on these different talk shows, and then are forced to co-host the morning talk show in an effort to bring the ratings back up. And it's really funny. It's sweet. Like I said, I'm just a Lucy Parker fangirl. So all the praise. Not my favorite in the series, but I had such a good time with it. And then my other nonfiction of the month, I really slowed down on my nonfiction this month, was Dolls of Our Lives, Why We Can't Quit American Girl by Mary Mahoney and Allison Horrocks. And this is about American Girl and the chokehold that she has on those of us who grew up in the 90s. And this, I don't know if I would widely recommend this. because I don't know that I've ever read a book that is more specifically targeted to who I am as a almost 40-year-old white woman. Like, yeah. But I had a really good time with this. I did listen to it on audio, which is great because this was a podcast first, so the authors know how to talk into a microphone. And so it was basically like listening to a really long podcast episode, which is my favorite brand of nonfiction audio. So if you are of a similar age to me and also grew up in the 90s and were obsessed with American Girl, I think this would be a hit. If you've read this and you are not in that demographic and you liked it too, please tell me, because I am always interested into how other generations interact or feel about something that was really prevalent in my generation. So I'd love to hear if, like, you're not in my age demographic, but American Girl also had a chokehold on your life as a child. All right, and then for a book club, I read Hey Kiddo, and this is a YA graphic memoir about childhood abuse and family history, family addiction. Is heavy, but it is so well done. I've heard about this for a very long time. I've seen it on a ton of recommended reading lists, and I'm really glad I finally got around to it. I really liked the art style in here. He mixes, you know, his drawings with letters from his mom and art from his childhood. And his author's note at the end even said, like, the pineapple on the title pages or on the chapter pages is the wallpaper that was in his grandmother's kitchen. So let me back up. So this is a memoir and about Jarrett's childhood, and Jarrett was born to, his mom was really young when he was born and ended up in and out of clinics and what's that other word? Like houses you can go and stay at when you're still getting back on your feet after an addiction. Whatever that word is. And she also was in prison, and so his grandparents adopted him and raised him. And it's really just about his childhood and his relationship with his mother, or lack of relationship with his mother, and finding his father when he was in his teens. And yeah, if your heart can handle a harder read, I really do recommend it. I think it's really well done. It's excellent storytelling. It is intended for a teen audience, so it's not as heavy as it could be, but I thought it was excellent. Then I also read Magic for Liars. This is by Sarah Gailey. I didn't realize that this was Sarah Gailey's debut, but apparently it is. And this is about Ivy, who is a PI, and Ivy's life is a mess. Just a mess. And then she gets approached by the headmistress of this secret magical boarding school where a murder has occurred, and she wants to hire Ivy to come and solve the murder. Only Ivy's estranged twin sister teaches at this magic school, and Ivy's sister Tabitha has magic, but Ivy does not. And it has been a real driving force against them. It has really driven, that fact has really driven them apart. And so this is kind of a PI detective book and kind of a magical murder mystery. And I didn't love it as much as I have loved other books by Sarah Gailey. I didn't love how in the teens' lives at the school Ivy got. That was a little weird. There was also a romance that I wasn't super into. It felt kind of forced, felt really awkward. And so while there are parts that this is really, really dug, there are other things that I just kept it from being a favorite. I now want to go and read Sarah Gailey's YA magic book that they have, because I felt like the teen characters were interesting, but just were in Ivy's perspective the whole time, and so it felt weird to be in Ivy's perspective and interacting with the teens the way that she was. So I don't know. I still big fan of Sarah Gailey. I just didn't love this one. And then I read Sir Callie and the Champions of Helston by Esme Symes Smith. This is middle grade, about Callie, who really, really wants to be a knight, but in this kingdom of Helston, there are very strict gender roles, and boys are trained to be knights and girls have magic, and Callie is non-binary and doesn't fit in either camp but wants to be a knight so badly, even though the world refuses to see them as anything other than a girl. And so there is a lot of queer phobia in here, there is a lot of misgendering, there is a lot of adults not protecting children, so it's very accurate for what we have going on in the year of 2024, but I think so true for what non-binary kiddos go through in their day-to-day lives at school, out in the world. So I really liked the writing. I really liked the characters. I loved this friend group so much. I am very much looking forward to reading book 2, and I hope book 2 we get a little bit more action adventure plot, because the plot of this one really is just breaking down the bigotry in this kingdom, and I want to read these characters going on adventures and maybe have, you know, live, laugh, loving a little bit more instead of fighting for the right to exist. And then the last one that's in this stack is The September House by Carissa Orlando. This is a haunted house horror. I really loved the ending of this, which is why it's on this list and not in the disappointment list. If the ending had gone another way, whoo boy. But this is about, oh gracious, I read this at the beginning of the month. Oh, this is about Margaret, who has moved into her dream house with her husband Hal. The only problem is that in September the walls bleed and all these ghosties come out of the woodwork, and there's something in the basement that wants out as well, which Margaret just takes in stride. She can handle it, except for when Hal leaves and her daughter won't let it go. Like, can't find Hal, and like Hal leaves as in disappears, and Margaret says it's fine and her daughter just doesn't buy it. Listen, I hated that daughter so much. If I could have this book without the daughter, I think it would have been a 5-star book, but that daughter drove me absolutely bananas. I couldn't stand her, but I did really like the tone of this. It is pretty heavy content wise. Like, while the tone is humorous, the content is really heavy, so I would definitely like check trigger warnings if that's something like that you need to look into. I knew too much about this book going into it, and I wish I had known even less, because I think I would have had better time if I had known less. I also think some of the content warnings that people share are spoilers for this book, so I'm not giving them specifically, but I'm going to tell you to just, like, if you lean a little bit more on the sensitive side, maybe go check the content warnings. Okay, yeah, cool. All right, now we're on to the best stack. Last stack, best stack. This is the books that I loved that I read this month. Do I want to end on a particular book? Yes, I do. Okay, I'm going to rearrange the stack a little bit. Okay, I got it. On to favorite books. I read Basil and Oregano. This is a, my words, YA graphic novel? Yes. Set in this fantasy world where culinary skills is also a magical art, and we're following Basil and Arabella, who are students at this magic culinary boarding school, and it is sapphic, and there's food, and there's these adorable little familiars. Like, there's Tomato the dog, who is the cutest thing I have ever seen, and I'm not a pet person, but if I could have, look at this little pumpkin. If I could have that for a pet, I could be on board. So this was very sweet, very cute, absolutely adorable, big fan, and I think this is also this author's debut, and I want them to write, I want her to write more books. And beyond being sapphic, like, the queer rep across the board is so good in this book. I also read Strange Worlds Travel Agency by L.D. Lipinski. This is another middle grade book. about this girl who has just moved into this new village, and in her wandering around the main street exploring, finds this travel agency run by this very surly 18-year-old, and there are all these suitcases, and she comes to find out that the suitcases can be used to travel to alternate worlds. And I think this is a book made for oldest children. And I really liked the relationship that developed between these two main characters. It was a really sweet, like, older brother, younger sister kind of dynamic. I loved the creativity in the worlds that they traveled to, and I just thought this was so fun, and I really want to continue on with the series because I thought this was just such a good time. Surprise of the month. Maybe not. So I have low-key had this author on my mental 5-star prediction list since her very first book came out. Every time a new book has come out, I've looked at it and thought, I think you are going to be a favorite author. I just have to read your books first. And I finally did it. I read These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, and it's so shiny. And I loved it so much. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in the 1920s in Shanghai. There's magical realism, and it's a magical realism if it's a fake Shanghai. I mean, it's Shanghai, but it's not strictly historical Shanghai. Anyways, loved it so much. I love the writing. I loved the characters. I loved where she mirrored Romeo and Juliet and where she did her own thing. I loved that I could pinpoint characters, like, even though people's names are different, I loved all the Easter eggs. And I had heard in reviews that some people thought it was slow paced and that it dragged, and it didn't for me. I mean, yes, I recognize that it is a slower paced book, but in this instance, it totally worked for me. I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to read book 2 because that cliffhanger was so hurtful, so mean, I was so mad. I mean, I saw it coming, but I was also mad. And I'm just now so excited to keep reading Chloe Gong, and I hope I just continue to love the rest of her books as much as I loved These Violent Delights. The other thing I really loved about this is how badass Juliet is in this. Like, I think 90% of the reason I loved it is because of how Gong wrote Juliet in this book. She's just awesome. Did I say that this Romeo and Juliet's enough of a tell, right? So we have two characters who belong to rival gangs, right? We got it? Okay, cool. Maybe this is more of a surprise, or maybe not, because I got this recommendation from Talia Hibbert. So if you sign up for Talia Hibbert's newsletter, sometimes she'll write about book recommendations because she'll write about what she's been reading. And she talked about this one at some point last year, and I put it on my list of like books I'm interested in, and then I asked for it for Christmas. But this is The Lord of Stariel by A.J. Lancaster. It's book 1 in a 5-book series. And this is my favorite subgenre of fantasy, which is historical fantasy. So this is set in a made-up world, but this world is very Victorian England coded, at least in my perception of it. And our main character, Hedda, has come home to her family's estate because her father has died, and they need to have the funeral, and then also this land has to be, that her family's estate is on, has to be tied to the Lord. And the Lord can be anybody in the family, but they have to go through the ritual where the land picks who the new Lord is. And so there's fae in this, there's messy family drama, there's a little bit of a mystery, there's a romance. I love the romance so much. Like, I want to read book 2 mostly because I need to see what happens with this romance. I really love the writing, I really love the characters, I love the setting. Like, seriously, this subgenre is my favorite. It's like half a soul. I just forgot every other book that's like this that I've ever read in my entire life, but Half a Soul is always the first one that comes to mind. That is my favorite. Oh, Lady Isabella Trent, I think, has that subgenre. Anyways, it's my favorite. Like, historical fiction with magic, love it. Ooh, Letters to Half Moon Street is like that too. Okay, anyways, I loved it. It was so good. And then I only did one reread this month, which is, I think, good for me. I reread Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. At the beginning of every year, I reread a Locked Tomb book. It's just kind of what I do now. And this is the second time I've reread Harrow, and this was the first time that I feel like I actually finally got it. Not all of it, but I got maybe 80% of it this time. I'm going to give that credit to the Locked Tomb podcast. They do very spoilery recaps of the books, like 5 chapters per episode, and having those two hold my hand while I read this book really made it a favorite. This is the first time I've given this book 5 stars. I thought it was so funny. I've never seen humor in this book before, but this time I thought it was so funny and I laughed out loud multiple times, and I just might love this book now more than I love Gideon. That feels really bold because I really love Gideon, but I just thought this was such a good time. I can't tell you what it's about because it's a whole bunch of spoiler, but it's the follow-up to Gideon the Ninth, and it is a confusing time, but it's also a really cool, masterful time. So if you can handle trusting an author to see you through the confusion, I highly recommend the Locked Tomb series. But if being confused in books is not your thing, no matter what, don't do it to yourself. But for me, this is my favorite series of all time, and rereading these books gives me so much joy. Final book, which is my favorite book of the month, was Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This is a dark contemporary romance about serial killers, but good serial killers because they only kill the truly evil people in the world. And they meet and have this little yearly competition to see who can get the bad guy first. And while entering into this yearly competition, they fall in love. Oh, and I just loved it so much. It's dark. Like, Brynne Weaver put a list of content and trigger warnings in the beginning of the book, and like, listen to her because she's not kidding. There is some chaotic, messed up stuff in this book, but it's also so funny. It was so cute. Like, this book did not have any business being this disgusting and this cute, sometimes within the same scene. But I just loved it. I loved Brynne Weaver's writing style. I love the humor. I love the characters. The audiobook was like 10 out of 10. Audiobook is so, so, so good. And I just, like, because I'm not a dark romance reader, like, that is not my thing. I don't like dark, angsty romance. But I loved this. So that's it. That's my wrap up. Those are all the books that I read in February. If you have made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. Please tell me when you plan on reading Butcher and Blackbird if you haven't yet already. And if you would like to leave an emoji to let me know you're here, let's do a bird emoji. And I will talk to you all in the next one. Bye.